we like to be involved in anywhere in the Southeast, and we're excited to be here. So thanks, Dwayne.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And then, so we have Jeff. We also have Rhett Murphy. Also, if you guys, if you don't mind, giving us a little brief snippet of why and how you got started in the brewing industry as I introduce you. So I'm going to start off with Rhett, if you don't mind. Rhett is the founder and owner of Etta Ryan Distilling Company here in Asheville, North Carolina. So Rhett, I'm going to let you take it away just for a minute.
Yeah. Hey, hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm honored. This should be fun and interesting. So like I said, I'm Rhett Murphy from Etta Ryan Distilling Company, and it's an Amaro-focused distillery here in Asheville. We opened in March of 2018, and it's kind of a few-year journey to get to that point. And I came at it from being an organic vegetable and berry farmer for 15 years, mostly in this area, but also in the like Chapel Hill, Carborough area for a few years. And I think with farming, if you're inspired and motivated, it's a great occupation. But after a certain amount of time and getting a little bit burnt out, I needed something else to do. And I was a home distiller. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. And my thing was playing with botanicals that we grew on the farm or that grew in the forest around us. And just started making a bunch of homemade booze. And some laws were changed in 2016 that allowed a North Carolina distillery to sell bottles on site, and some people that wanted to invest like what I was making. And initially it was going to be a gin distillery, and here we are 4 years later, and we don't make gin, but we make a bunch of other stuff. So
Great.
That's my story.
Great. And then Todd, I hope I don't butcher your last name, Todd. Todd Boera?
Yeah,
is it Boera?
Yep.
Great, good. So he's the brewer, co-founder of Fonta Flora Brewery. Are you in Morganton, Todd?
Yeah, the original location is in downtown Morganton, and now our main operation is in even a smaller and weirder town called Nebo, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great, man. How did you get started?
Yeah, honestly, an oddly similar story to Rhett just said, and I think he and I share Warren Wilson College as a background. And I was in school there, which is just up the mountain from me, just a little east of Asheville, Warren Wilson College in Swannanoa, North Carolina. And so I was studying sustainable agriculture there, while simultaneously it's a work college. So I was working on the college garden, and so also simultaneously being obsessed with home brewing and with beer. And every waking moment, I would say other than school, but most of the time instead of school, was spending time researching beer and brewing on my own there. And so taking components of what I was doing, growing ingredients on the college garden, and was rapidly incorporating those ingredients into some early home brews. So some of my very first beers were utilizing ingredients that I was growing on the farm at that campus.
Okay. And we're going to get into this growing, being a grower, and also all of a sudden evolving into a brewer or distiller or whatever. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too, because I think that seems to be a very interesting transition, and I'm seeing a theme with it. So Garrett, I hope you're still there. I can't see you, but hopefully we can hear you. Garrett Oliver, author, speaker, brewmaster at Brooklyn Brewery in New York. Garrett, I have to admit, I did a little research, and I'm not a drinker, okay? So don't throw anything at me, guys. I did see Garrett's YouTube video from 8 years ago on how to drink a beer.
Oh, good Lord. I'm not sure I've seen that.
Well, you said, and I want to see if this is still true. You said the USRDA guidelines say we should have a beer or two every day. So I'm behind if that's true. Just want to make sure if is that still a fact?
That was at least accurate at the time. It may have changed under the current administration. However, the underlying research has not changed. People who drink a beer or two every day live a lot longer than teetotalers. This is simply a fact, so you can go look it up.
Yeah.
This is also covered by studies in almost every country that's done such studies. So it is a good thing, and like all things, in moderation.
All right.
If you eat a stick of butter every day, you're gonna die. So it's pretty simple.
So you've done quite a few things, Gary. How did you get involved in this industry?
Well, I will keep that story short because we don't have that much time. And obviously I've been here, a long time. I always tell the brewing kids that I'm 400 years old and I've always been here, like Dracula. But in fact, I started in 1983. I moved to England and I was stage managing rock bands. At the same time, I was falling in love with cask conditioned British beer, something which I was unfamiliar with, because in the United States, we had descended very much into what I call the matrix. And we were living in a very industrialized food world, and that included the beer world. So I did not see a stalk of actual broccoli until I was in my 20s. And that is not, unfortunately, a joke. That was normal. There were two kinds of broccoli, Bird's Eye and Del Monte, and they came either canned or frozen. So what you see in the supermarket now, where there are fresh vegetables and things like that everywhere, there were no fresh vegetables in a restaurant, in a supermarket when I grew up. And that was similar to the world of beer. There was one kind of beer. It had a whole bunch of different names, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 names, depending upon where you were, but they pretty much tasted the same. And when I got to England, there was all this other stuff. And then I went traveling all over Europe for a month. And I went to Belgium, and I went to Germany, and I went to the Czechoslovakia, it was back then. And I discovered that I had been lied to about everything. The cheese that I had been eating wasn't cheese. The bread that I had been eating wasn't bread. The ice cream that I was eating wasn't ice cream. The beer that I was drinking, as far as I was now concerned, had not been beer. It wasn't made like beer. It didn't look like beer. It didn't smell like beer. It wasn't made how beer was made, and it wasn't made from what beer was made from. So, and the same was true of bread and all these other things. And so I got back to the United States in 1984, and I was really missing this thing which had become a big part of my life. And I started brewing at home, not because I was interested in home brewing. I wasn't. I brewed the beer in order to have the beer. So imagine once in your life, you had all your life it was Wonder Bread, and then you had this spectacular loaf of French bread. And people said, well, this is bread. And you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. and then like you couldn't get it anymore. Well, you might learn how to bake.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And through that, I fell in love with it. I eventually, in 1989, ended up apprenticing to a guy named Mark Whitty, who had been the head brewer for Samuel Smith's brewery in England. And I was his apprentice for a few years, then took over that brewery called Manhattan Brewing Company. And today on Instagram, Garrett Oliver, I tell the story of going from Manhattan Brewing Company to Brooklyn Brewery in 1994. And since then, I built that brewery, and we kind of go from there, the books and everything else.
Right. That's great. That's a very interesting dynamic. So I have a question for you all, another question, because I think that before we get into all the talk about barriers to entry, we have to talk about our core competency. And of course, I'm sure that no one here is going to be biased and think that their product is superior to anyone else's. But I want to hear a little bit about your core competency in terms of another thing I talk to entrepreneurs about is what do you do better than anyone else? What do you do so well that you would never outsource it to anyone? because that is part of your brand. That's part of who you are. And that's something that a lot of you folks who may be in the room thinking about tapping into entrepreneurship in general, not just brewing, but entrepreneurship in general, you need to understand what core competency is. So any of our panelists who want to chime in on that, just tell us a little about what your core competency is.
I could start.
Okay.
Well, so it's a little bit easier from my position than probably some other people. What we do at Etta Rhine is kind of like its own thing. So for most of you who are not familiar, it's an Amaro focused distillery, but our actual drilled down focus is making Amaros that are rooted in Southern Appalachian botanicals. And so as far as domestic Amaro distilleries, you're already starting with a very thin crowd, and then putting it down into Southern United States Amaro distilleries. There is two, and one is in DC. If that's in the Southern United States, I mean, that's questionable, I guess. And as far as one that's sort of terroir based, I think we're the only one, and one that's sort of Southern Appalachian based, we're definitely the only one. And so, you know, I would say our core competency is the recipe development that took years of figuring these things out, and the sort of uniqueness of the products. You know, I think anyone could figure out how to take plants, and the techniques that we use are not complicated or secret, but it's the years that it took to figure out the interactions of these ingredients, and what works well together, and how to source certain things, and how to process certain ingredients that aren't available commercially, and all of these things. It's just like a slow trudge to get there. And I just think that I don't necessarily need to worry about someone. Well, I'm just trying to say, I don't think we have special skills that anyone couldn't have. It just takes a long time to figure it out.
Right.
And so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Right. A long time to develop the expertise and I guess the recipes and all those things.
My partner had been working on, before we started collaborating, he had been working on the initial Fernet recipe that we started going off of for about 3 years. And then we got together and we spent about 2 years on that one. And in that process, some other things sort of magically spun out of it that were accidents that we now sell that are doing great. But it's just a long process.
Yeah.
And, you know, very secretive, and yeah.
What about you, Todd?
Yeah, once again, a little oddly similar in a way. We, you know, from day one, so we'll be celebrating 7 years as a business pretty well right now. September of 2013 is when we opened our doors, and from the jump, the idea was to take what I had explained earlier about incorporating local ingredients, and there really wasn't, you know, another way. It was like, this is how we're going to start a brewery and have a focus on that. And, you know, we were lucky enough in the Southeast and now there are multiple, but at that time there was one malt house where we were able to source our grain from, and that grain was being grown kind of all around the Southeast. And now it's been really focused and honed in on being grown in North Carolina, the majority of. So anyway, so for us, it was utilizing local ingredients, having real meaningful connections with farmers. And, you know, now it's a fairly popular concept to to create something, with a sense of place is what is often, kind of talked about, certainly how I talk about things. And so that's what we were doing, what I was trying to do early on. And then, something that was important as we grew, I started on, a system that was making, effectively 150 gallons, of beer at a time, to now, we're making around 500 at a time, with fermenters, that are much larger than that and can hold, a whole lot of beer. So the point of that was as we transitioned, making sure that we stayed true to those roots, like growing. We never wanted to sacrifice any of those early identifiers that we really found important, and then we ultimately felt set us apart. So I would say certainly for us, the core competency is, and like Red said, it's taken years of, I text farmers, just to say hello and check in on their family and, things like that. So it's a different business model, than just placing an order for something online. There's a lot of real connections, that have been built throughout the years. And not to sound cutthroat about it, what's happened is basically like buying out entire crops because of our size now of, certain things, buying, 2, 3, 4 tons of, fruits of, different things like that. So we've put in the time, made connections, and, as Rhett mentioned, like really honed skills over those years, and are still doing so, to work with non-traditional ingredients and have systems in place to be able to do so.
And that's very interesting because you touched on supplier power that's kind of that one of those 5 forces I had mentioned earlier. And that's why I was saying it's really interesting to see the farming connection with the brewing connection. And there's another one that I was thinking about too, which kind of brings me to Garrett. But if Garrett can kind of talk about his what specifically what is your core competency, Garrett, and then I'll touch on another thought that I have with everyone here. So.
Well, first of all, I want to express my appreciation of Rhett's ideas in more than one way. We made a Kiwi-based barrel-aged sour once called Kiwi's Playhouse. So you'll appreciate that. Also, I was one of the founders of Slow Food USA, on the original board, and then went from there for 5 years, working on the board of governors for Slow Food International, working on worldwide slow food policy. And now I'm on the board for the Museum of Food and Drink. My favorite tomorrow, probably if I have to pick one, is their barista. I have also here all kinds of very, very obscure things with all kinds of infusions from all over the world.
We need to hang out.
Well, we can have a fun conversation about that.
Hey,
We're
Garrett.
also the first brewery to make beers based on cocktails. We were the first brewery to do collaboration brews.
Uh-huh.
And so, I guess my core competency is being old. And I bring that to bear, in a form of, and I'm going to combine 2 things, which is our internationalism plus age, which equals a certain type of worldliness. If I would have visited about a dozen countries this year, if we hadn't had this pandemic. And so my point of view does not include only the things I see around me. It includes the 30 countries or so that I've been in. We sell beer in 35 countries, and most people don't know this, but most of Brooklyn Brewery's beer, a little bit more than half, is sold outside the United States. Outside of the New York area, the next biggest market for us is Sweden, followed closely behind by the UK and then France and a few other European countries. You know, if you go to Stockholm, you will see, or Paris, you will see our beer, you know, everywhere. And so that becomes a competency because I've been drinking natural wine, for example, for 30 years, more than 30 years. You know, so I've seen everything happen, sometimes twice along the way. And as a result of that, I can reach back into memories that other people don't have and places that other people haven't seen and pull out things and also synthesize them together. So if you, for example, go to Brazil, you know, you kind of discover that Americans, the fruit that Americans are familiar with is like maybe 20% of the fruit that your average Brazilian would see like in a large local market. We know absolutely nothing about fruit, nothing about food compared to a lot of people in the world. But because I've been there, I know these things. And I put them into our beers, and it informs what we do, and it informs how we do it. And so, you know, we have a certain core competency which cannot be copied. And so that is not really a barrier to entry. It's a barrier to your specific competition with what I do because you can't do it. That also allows us to really take on, I think, the true ethos of craft brewing, which is whatever I do know, I will tell you if you know what question to ask.
Yeah.
You know, and I won't hold anything back.
Your competitor will never tell you how to beat them.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, I will, you know, and I have on any number of occasions, and we can get into it later because when you talk about barriers to entry and knowledge and everything else, I think that craft brewing is unique in that, you know, we are not by and large secretive people.
Right.
And, you know, there is, you know, I come from a confidence that even if I tell you everything, you know, it's like the Matrix where he's like,
yeah,
yeah, and like, okay, here's how to, you know, here's how to do kung fu. Here's all the stuff. Now see if you can beat me. And so, and I don't mean that to be egotistical. There are so many great brewers out there and people that I look up to. It's that I look forward to the competition, and it makes us better, and it makes our industry better, and it makes it stronger. I have certainly been given competitive advantages by other brewers on a great number of occasions, and I have given them competitive advantages back, and that is worldwide.
And it's really interesting you brought that up, Garrett, because I've talked to entrepreneurs. We have entrepreneurs who do guest counseling for us. They teach programs for us. And I was talking to one specifically and who does web design. And I said, man, why are you teaching people how to build websites? You know, you charge people to do that. He's like, you know, he says, first of all, it's an ever-changing business. And he said, you know, if someone's willing to put the work in that I've put in to be successful at this, he said, more power to him.
Yes.
So he kind of has, that's kind of the same mentality that he has. You also touched on something too, which goes into my next question. You mentioned the pandemic and how you haven't been able to travel as much. And I'm just interested in hearing how has that core competency allowed you all to thrive or to remain relevant during this pandemic in these times? Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'll speak that, because, I have, having done books and whatever else and a lot of television, I can understand how to use all this stuff effectively. I've been doing a lot of video stuff. On Friday, I did a tasting for a bunch of people in Australia. So I was 11 p.m. my time on Friday night, and they were, I think, the next day at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. I've done like a big beer and cheese tasting for Food and Wine magazine for stuff like that. I'm doing a lot of, I'm involved with a lot of things that are, you know, kind of tying beer and food and cocktails and everything together and projecting that out from my kitchen and my living room. So, you know, that, and to a number of countries, I mean, to Sweden, to everywhere. And so I'm doing the thing that I can do, you know, which is projecting from where I am because I can't go there.
Right. Rhett, what about you?
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this exactly correctly, but
There's no right or wrong answer, Rhett.
well, in relation to core competency, so pre-March, we'll say for a couple of years, our sales in North Carolina were way more heavily weighted towards the mixed beverage market, so bars and restaurants. And post mid-March, well, whenever everything shut down, I guess that was St. Patrick's Day here. The sales after an initial dip, our sales in North Carolina have remained steady, sometimes higher, sometimes a little lower, but right about where they were through the ABC. And what this means is that a whole lot more people were taking our bottles home. And I think that because people weren't able to go out and get a nice cocktail from the place that they go to with that nice meal or whatever, people still needed like something to make things special or to have like a nice evening at home or whatever. And because we're such a unique product that they may or may not have had before, or maybe they're trying to step out of their comfort zone or make new types of cocktails or whatever, we've been able to get a lot more of our bottles on home bars than ever before. And that has, I think, you know, I'm hoping that will continue into the future. You know, slightly unrelated, but what happened to us at the beginning of this is we make our Amaros with a neutral spirit that's sourced. Our still is busy making rye whiskey all the time. And it just, for us, doesn't make sense to make the neutral spirit. So we took all the neutral spirit that we had and immediately turned it into hand sanitizer. And our next 265-gallon tote got turned into hand sanitizer. And that was all given away, donated. And through that donation, we had 6 hours a week where we'd open up the garage door and whoever came could get a few bottles of hand sanitizer. And if they wanted, they could buy a bottle. And during that, first 2-month period or so, our sales for those 6 hours a week were just as good in bottle sales as they were for an average week at the distillery before that. And people were so appreciative that people that would normally buy our products bought them. And through that process, we probably converted some people who have never drank Amari before, who think they wouldn't like this, who don't have a reference point. Some of those people now are avid supporters and buy our products. And another thing that happened, we had a product called Lindera that we never put in the ABC because the ABC board didn't want us, they actually wouldn't allow us to. So we could sell it at the distillery, but not through the ABC. And it's a vodka infused with spice bush. And it's a very delicate thing. And the sales for it were our lowest product. And through this, that is probably our second most popular product now. And it's about to hit the ABC store shelves in a few weeks. And, yeah, still, I don't know if I answered the question. I was rambling, sorry.
You did a good job. That's pivoting at its finest. That's great.
I've been fascinated to see you know, the way all this stuff ties into what's often done and has been done, you know, in Italy. This is somewhat famous by Sonia. This is Levi Serafino's distillery, and this is you know, his grappa infused with local sage. And there are all of these grappas, you know, grappe, you know, in Italy that kind of tie into the Amaro tradition. And, you know, this is stuff that is like a side branch of a farmer tradition and like hilltop mountain stuff. And it's really cool to see what, you know, what you're doing, bringing your own thing to it. And he also like, you know, draws the labels, you know, and everything else. It's a whole thing. So it's very cool.
Hey, Garrett, I would love to send you some bottles. So when this is over, make sure I get your information. And you got it. And by the way, my name is actually Garrett. Rhett is just a truncated version of Garrett.
Oh, that's cool.
That's funny. You know, I love it. You know, I've never really thought. I mean, when I was a kid, my family called me, you know, Gary, and I got rid of that pretty early. But yeah, I never thought of Rhett as a possible, you know, shortening of Garrett. Well, it looks cool.
I didn't do that. I would have kept it Garrett. It was like before I was cognizant of my name, I was Rhett, and it just stuck. Yeah, so.
That's great. So Todd, you want to chime in about Fontaflora?
Yeah, definitely. We, in terms of kind of what, everything that went down in March, we have been oddly on the same trajectory in terms of like production. So we're set to kind of make hit the numbers that we had expected to do this year. However, we had to pivot pretty hard in the amounts that we would either, you know, package for draft, and then what we started doing for packaging in cans. And I'd say, you know, that's definitely, you know, the beneficial side that kind of sets us up to be nimble is the size that we are, and we can afford to, you know, kind of make those changes. It really increased, you know, put a pretty heavy load on our staff. We're pretty tight, you know, small crew that does, you know, an immense amount of work to create the products that we do. So it kind of put more on, you know, mine and my team's shoulders, but we've been able to, you know, thankfully, compared to what it could have been, you know, that was a really great thing to have to try to like pivot to and figure out, you know, everyone's work-life balance opposed to the, you know, the opposite. And so another part for us, our production facility, sounds weird calling it a production facility because it's on a really idyllic farm that overlooks the Linville Gorge. So a really rugged wilderness area in Western North Carolina. And so we're on a 15-acre farm where we make all of our beer. And so because of that, you know, before the pandemic, we had been trying to figure out how to get more people to come and visit, you know, location, like quite literally in the middle of nowhere, to, you know, now folks don't really want to spend time going to, you know, bars and restaurants in cities, at least, you know, we're seeing that shift. We also have a taproom location in Charlotte that opened up right before the pandemic, and our numbers there, not that we have a lot of data, you know, are much lower than we anticipated, and our rural, you know, farm location, you know, it's been more of a conversation of how do we do this responsibly and keep people safe while trying to welcome humans who are looking for that rural escape.
Right. So location, I've heard location, size, sourcing, heard some good information. One thing that I'm interested in also is, you know, I do have clients who come in and they have, they're just trying to get ideas. They have no clue on what to expect in terms of just ways to even enter the industry. So there's an understanding that there is a need for capital. But what are some other things that are kind of inherent to the industry that people should be aware of if they're thinking about pursuing entrepreneurship endeavors there?
I'll go.
Okay.
So I mentioned that I was a home distiller. In the small craft distillery world, there's not as many opportunities maybe as in the beer world to really learn the business and the craft of that at like a successful working place. I was not at the age where I was gonna like pick up and move someplace to take an internship for a year. And also there was no real examples of doing what we were doing that I could have done that with. And for the distilling world, you know, AB Tech, I think probably is a great option, but I don't think that I realized that that was an option when I was doing it. So it was all just sort of like figure it out. And I love where I'm at right now, but had I known the like mountain of crap that I was about to embark to climb, I don't think I would have done it, you know, in hindsight. And a lot of that is dumb economic projections. That's just me not knowing what I'm doing with certain levels of equipment and stuff. There's the regulatory issues. And then there's the North Carolina ABC, which is this whole nother level of, not that it wasn't expected, but I kind of thought that I could just get my products on the shelves. And that's stupid in hindsight, but I didn't realize that I have to go bag a board in Raleigh just to accept a product, to put it in the warehouse. So then I get to go to 150 managers of stores to, you know, try and get them to put it on their shelves. And I just don't think I would have done it had I known what I know now, but I'm glad that I did.
So anybody else want to chime in on that one? Garrett?
Well, you know, the question was about, you know, what are barriers that you see now that you didn't know, you know, about when you started?
Basically, if you're talking to someone who's a home distiller, home brewer, and they're just wet behind the ears and you want to give them some advice, like you just need to be aware of this, what are some things you would?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people underestimate the value of actual knowledge. And what I mean by that is that, okay, here I will be boastful. I am a very, very, very good cook. You know, there is nobody, I don't care whether you have 3 Michelin stars, I am not scared to cook for you. I cook in front of audiences. Me and a bunch of the brewers get together and we're making, you know, boneless stuffed quail with foie gras and truffles and, you know, a demi-glace, and we're doing everything from scratch in front of a crowd while talking, okay? I'm good. However, if you put me in a busy restaurant kitchen on Saturday night, I will melt into a pool of butter and you can rinse me down the drain. I know nothing of any usefulness, you know, that can, you know, I mean, people will walk in sometimes, they're like, oh, you know, I got this and that, and I won these prizes in a homebrew contest and I can help you. It's like, you can't help anybody. You, like, if you come in, our job, first of all, is for you not to die today. And secondly, to impart to us, to you, the things that we know that will be useful to you. And that is the first thing to know, you know, is what you don't know. And that in every general profession, there are some things where stuff's pretty similar, but cooking at home doesn't look anything like cooking in a restaurant kitchen, and brewing in a brewery is not in any way similar to home brewing. They're completely different things that look the same, but are totally different. And so this is one reason why, the stuff that I'm working on, the Michael James Jackson Foundation for Brewing and Distilling, is seeking to, what we are doing is giving people of color, specifically in this case, the opportunity through scholarships for technical education. And it's the only thing that we're doing, is we're giving scholarships for technical education. You will learn how to brew, and you will learn how to distill, and you will come away with a certificate that means when you get in front of somebody, I know how to do these things. Just as if you had a degree from CIA Culinary Institute, or you came from UC Davis or whatever else, because at least in the community of people of color, those skills are difficult to come by because of institutional factors, including the fact that African American families at least have about 1/10 of the family assets of other families. You look at a course that I've hired many people out of, American Brewers Guild, great course. It costs $10,000. And so, in requiring people to show up with either a couple of years of experience under their belt, or a certificate or a degree or something saying you know how not to kill yourself in our brewery, and you also know how not to ruin that $75,000 tank worth of beer in one go, we need to see something. However, the problem, of course, is that it's a chicken and egg thing. If you're requiring experience and no one's in the industry, and you're requiring something that costs money and nobody has any money, then you have become part of the problem, in your requirements. And since I can't change the requirements because I can't have amateurs in the brew house, at our level, then I'm changing the barriers to entry for those people by giving them the tools they need to actually show up on a level playing field with other people. So that's kind of I think it's important for people to walk in. I tell people, like, what's the number one thing that I need to know when I'm going out there looking for a brewing job is, like, first of all, if you have not worked in a brewery before, the number one thing you need to know is that you can't help. And that is, it sounds nasty. It's a terrible thing to say to somebody, but your knowledge of that fact is going to be the most valuable thing to you, because it will bring you the humility that you will need to get the experience, to get your foot in the door. Because otherwise people show up full of brio, as if because I was a good cook at home, I'd show up to 11 Madison Park and say, dudes, you should see me go. Like, I'm such a good cook. I'll bet I have 3 or 4 new ideas for dishes that will be great on your menu, Yeah. And, it's insane. And so I think that's, that is the biggest piece of advice that I give people. It's like, go out there and get that knowledge. It's not the only way into the brew house, but it is a tried and true way.
Okay, that's good, and thank you for that. So one thing I want to talk to you about, this is probably going to be an offline conversation, is the opportunities that you have for people of color, because we're looking at that is something that we may be interested in duplicating here locally in our area. So we would definitely be touching base on that, Garrett.
Well, I'll be sending you scholarship awardees.
Okay.
So we definitely have things to talk about.
Okay, that sounds great. So Todd.
Yeah, Garrett's response was awesome to that, and just to kind of like a little follow up from what he said is that kind of knowing your strengths and also knowing when to ask for help, and just because your friends love the the IPA that you were making at home doesn't make you ready for, opening up a brewery. It's like truly simple as that. And then even if, you can be the best brewer in the world and have, or whatever it is, that you're trying to start up, and you could have all these people clamoring for your product. And if you have no idea how to run a business, like it's going to fail. And so for me, I did not realize that at the time. However, looking back on it, I was lucky enough to, though we have, loads of, we're like a family at this point where we lock each other in, in a room and, have like 4-hour, powwows of like, how we think, this business, should be run, but looking back at when I started Fauna Flora, my business partners are all very business savvy. And, luckily we shared the same vision along the way. This could have been a disaster easily, but we, they shared my vision of the direction that I wanted to take Fauna Flora in. And they, are, the super savvy ones that could, be on here and be like spinning off, tons of stuff with barrier to entry and like, all that. Like, they're not things that I thought about, really at all, even up to, kind of looking into, being a part of this, but then slowly realizing that a lot of the thoughts and what I was bringing to the table were exactly the things that, you're trying to get to the bottom of with, with a lot of things that you asked us to reflect on. So I just think knowing your strengths and finding the right partners, or if you are going at it alone, part of the problem in this industry is that everybody expects you to make world-class beer, be a plumber, be a welder, be an electrician, then go home and do your books, and then go out on the weekends and sell beer. And like, all that's bullshit. Like, you really need to focus and hone in on what you're really good at and make that the priority, and find other people who are equally as good to help round out everything that, you're trying to accomplish.
Fantastic answer. So we do have a couple of comments or questions in the chat box. Jill, you wanna?
Okay. We may get surround sound here.
Wow, that was quite something.
I don't know. Do you want to ask so it doesn't sound so crazy?
Yeah, maybe I need to ask. Maybe I need to ask his echoing quite a bit. So just trying to share the love here a little bit. But anyway, could a brew pub thrive only on draft sales due to North Carolina distribution laws?
I mean, there's a lot to that. I think that, it depends on what you want out of your business ultimately, because, with the size system that we opened in the size town, that we did, Morganton, is still only a town of 17,000 people. And that's kind of like including the surroundings. And so, if you want to stay small, intimate, kind of be the one, doing the brewing, having a lot of, you may have some help, bartenders and, and whatnot, but you'd be able, I think, depending on the size system and the location that you choose, certainly be able to, I mean, that's what we were doing before we decided that we wanted a little more growth. And, that was our original business model was, initially 100%, draft, weren't doing anything. And then that transitioned into, all bottle conditioned, very labor intensive, ways to package certain styles of our beer, to now what we have. But yeah, I mean, I think the answer is very, you could take it a lot of ways, but I totally think it's possible.
So,
well, let me give you the long
Go ahead,
view
Gary.
here, because I've seen, several waves of this, and I'll give you the short version. In New York City at the time when North Carolina still had the cap and I was involved in the Pop the Cap campaign, that was more than 10 years ago. But we had no cap in New York City, and Brooklyn Brewery created the craft beer market in New York City from scratch. You know, if you weren't Sam Adams or Guinness, all craft beer in New York City came in through us. You know, we carried 200 different brands eventually, and when we sold off that business, we were the largest Sierra Nevada wholesaler outside of Northern California, and the biggest wholesaler of almost anything that you can think of. And so we basically started off as fish with no ocean to swim in, and we dug the ocean and we filled it with water, and then we all swam in it. And eventually in New York City, there were 17 breweries, and they were all brew pubs just about. And we had the first wave of brew pubs. The brew pub was the place that you could go and you could get good beer. So when you saw the kettles in the window, everybody came running because your average place had Bud Miller Coors, whatever, it was, you know, regular beer. And when you saw the tanks, you knew that a brew pub was going to carry something more interesting. Then you had the rise of the beer bar. The beer bar shows up, and the brew pub's got 10 beers on, but the brew pub's got 50 beers on. And he's got 200 beers in bottles, the best stuff from all over the world. He's got saisons, he's got this, he's got that, everything that you read of in Michael Jackson's books. You know, and suddenly everybody looks at the brew pub and they're like, well, why would I go to the brew pub that's only got 10 beers when there's 50 beers on draft over here? There's 250 beers to this place. I'm going to go over there. So much better for me as the consumer. And so all the brew pubs in New York City went out of business because of the rise of, you know, of the beer bar. Then the thing that used to be called a beer bar became a regular bar. So now any bar has more than 20 taps. They all have dozens of bottles. And you have the re-rise of the brew pub, not as a brew pub, but as a tap room and part of a locavore movement with a completely different focus that has to do specifically with being from here, which is a thing that never counted in a lot of places, especially New York City, where people couldn't have cared less whether you were from here. They really couldn't. In fact, if you were from here, they're like, well, are you the best? Because if you're not the best is what we're looking for. And if the best is from Belgium, then screw you, we're going for the best. That was the attitude. Now there's a change. And my point being, if you're going to go into business, you know, I've been around for a long time, but it's not that long. I've seen 4 different versions of this market. Now you have a market where direct to consumer becomes super important, even for people for whom it wasn't important only a few months ago, including Brooklyn Brewery. You know, we never sold the beer out the back, you know, of our place. That wasn't our model. You know, we sold in the way that we sold. And I'll put it to both professional and consumers this way. It's important to understand who you are to the consumer, regardless of who you think you are. Take the Hazy Juicy IPA, right? We've had people leave us, go to the top producers of Hazy Juicy IPA, the names that we've all heard of, and come back to us. We know exactly how to brew all those beers down to the actual recipes of those beers that people are waiting online for. However, if we were to brew exactly the same beer and it tasted exactly like, you know, those beers, say we made a beer that tastes exactly like, you know, Orange Julius, no one is going to line up down the block and around the corner for our version thereof, because the beer is not the thing they're actually buying. You know, the thing that they're buying is being in line. The thing they're buying is an Instagram image. The thing they're buying is a brand. The thing they're buying is smallness. The thing they're buying is localness. They're consuming something other than the beer itself, which did not used to be the case. So it is really important for people to understand, you might want to change the way you are perceived, and you know, you have levers with which to do that. But if you don't know what people are actually consuming, it's very difficult for you to have a realistic idea of how to put you know, a business together. And the thing that people are consuming will change right before your eyes, sometimes 3 or 4 times over the course of a dozen years. Think of the 750 bottle, which only, the 750 milliliter bottle, which we put a lot of beers through. And we had the biggest re-fermentation program in the United States. I have 2,000 oak barrels under temperature control. We have a very big program. The 750, within a few years, just kind of vanished as a on-the-shelf package that people wanted. They suddenly said, well, it's too big. And I said, well, don't you have any friends? And the answer was no, they didn't have any friends. And now nobody has any friends, because you can't get together with anybody. So like that package is gone. Like I love it. And the thing that's meaningful to me, the package, the look, the pop of the cork means nothing to a 22-year-old. The pop of the cork is old. It's not celebratory. It doesn't feel, they don't get any frisson of excitement from that package or whatever. It just looks old. Looks like something your grandpa would do. And what they want is a can or something different that we don't even see yet. And so you will have to change things that you don't want to change for reasons that you do not want to change them for, if you want to stay current and you want to move with your consumer. You can still do your own stuff, but you're going to have to make changes.
And so you touched on a lot of things in regards to branding, Garrett, and that brings up our next session next month on September 24th. We're going to talk about developing a brand. So if you all haven't registered for that, you might want to check it out. But it's very interesting because a lot of marketing studies show that when you survey a business owner or an entrepreneur and you ask them about how people perceive their brand, when you actually survey the customer, it's completely different. So there is definitely a lack of engagement with your target market a lot of times. So folks need to understand that too, is that, the market drives sales. So you always have to think about that. Everything is customer driven. So you all have touched on a lot of things in regards to just being tenacious as well. So it's like, what was the driving force behind, specifically with you, Rhett, you did all this stuff at home for all these years. And it's like, what in the world, what was it that kept you going? I mean, did you have some inherent faith in the product? What exactly was it? What do you attribute it to?
I assume you're at like after you've jumped off the cliff, what keeps you going? I think it's the fact that you've jumped off a cliff and it's kind of a like, sink or swim. And if you sink, you've got quite a bit of other people's money wrapped up in it. So I've never really thought that was much of an option. And I've just trusted that if we could do what we're trying to do and do it in a way that I feel like I'm comfortable standing behind and that I feel really confident about, there may not be a large market for Amari in the United States right now, but there will be. And I'm not saying that we're going to build it, but it is happening. And I've watched my own friends and family get converted over. And, I think I've just like always had faith in our products and the system. I just haven't necessarily had faith in my own tolerance for bureaucracy and like whether I was going to be able to continue to wade this shit stream or whatever. But I've never doubted that we would make it, even through like this COVID thing and everything. Like, I kind of feel like we're just getting going. And, it's just all of other than like getting the money together and spending a couple of years of screwing stuff up, it's like now down to like annoyances, like bureaucratic annoyances that really are the issues. We have, there's a lot of creativity on my team right now. And so we probably, had COVID not happened, we'd have 2 canned Amaro pops on the market right now that were about to get canned when this happened. And we've got a Cochineal Beetle aperitivo, like Campari, that's done. And we've been making whiskey since 2017. So we've just been filling barrels with that. And I'm just trying to say, I've never not had faith in the whole thing.
How many people do you employ?
There's 3 of us now. Pre-COVID, there was 11, I think, at the end, but a lot of those were, no, okay, I just hired someone else. So there's 4 of us now, but most were bar staff and doing that. And now we don't have, that hasn't been open since March.
You sound like a great leader, man. If I had to pick a leader, that's the attitude I want them to have. So
Well, thank you.
that's great. So Todd, same question to you. What got you going? What kept you focused on making this thing work?
The business in general.
Yeah. In the very beginning, what was it? Because I'm sure someone was like, dude, you need to just get a job.
Well, yeah, that's been the interesting thing for me. I've never had another job other than working in the brewing world. Obviously, other than jobs throughout high school, college, and everything. But in terms of a career, I went from college to traveling Europe to coming back, convincing another local brewery to give me a job. Was there for 4 years and then opened up Fonta Flora, and we're almost 7, or we're 7 now. So all I've ever done professionally, it's all I know. So even it's hilarious to hear you say that, the idea of get a job is just I don't know what the hell else I would do. At this point, there's certainly plenty of things that, but anyways, there was really no, what we were seeing with what was happening, to our local community in Morganton, the whole idea, behind it was 2 of my business partners being from Morganton, and their parents were born in England, so having a really strong pub culture for them, having gone back to the UK, all the time to visit family. And when I had traveled around Europe that I just mentioned, I worked at, a pub in London for a number of months, and really just kind of, much like Garrett, mentioned, just completely fell in love with, everything about pub culture and, the beers, but more importantly, the culture. And so that is what I was excited about being a part of in a small town like Morganton. So kind of the same, there was really no, and especially it was just me early on. I was the only one on payroll, a lot of my business partners, so it was me doing, literally everything. And so it was really making sure that we were setting ourselves up for, for success, and, slowly building that community around beer and that gathering space, in downtown Morganton. So, it was, it wasn't, really an option to fail. And I think setting ourselves up for it by starting small, really just kind of set us down that path of making sure that we were able to succeed.
Great. How many folks do you employ?
Including bar staff now, we have just over 50. So between the Charlotte Tasting Room that just opened in January, our original location in downtown Morganton, and our farm location in Nebo, we're about 50 employees.
How many pre-COVID?
The
Same? About the same.
Yeah, well, maybe a few more. We've lost some bartenders here and there, but full-time staff has stayed the same. There were a little bit of furlough at first, and then quickly able to bring people back on full time.
So I'll ask you this. You don't have to answer it. I'm just curious. Were you all able to get any of the funding, the PPP funds or anything like that?
We were, yeah,
Okay.
Again, luckily, if it were left up to me, who knows if, that would have been a successful, launch into that. But again, that's where my business partners, really thrive and made sure that happened for us.
Good. That's great. So Garrett, what kept you pushing to get into the industry and get to where you are now? What was the driving force?
Well, there are, I guess, many elements to whatever your idea of, of is where I am now, whether you mean me personally or Brooklyn Brewery or whatever. But I think that really the thing that drove me is the thing that we do every day, which is, we actually, and I said this in my first book, Brewmaster's Table, the thing that we are doing is making our customers' lives just a little bit better every day. And, that is a thing that I really strongly believe in. I kind of feel like learning about craft beer is like discovering whatever it is that you love. Maybe you love modern art or you love jazz. And there came a day where somebody played you your first Coltrane record. And before that, you didn't have jazz. And then after that, you do have jazz. And that moment is a very small moment. It may only be a few minutes. But, if you pay attention, in that moment, a small door opens up. And when you walk through that door, on the other side of that door is a better life. You now have jazz forever, for the rest of your life. You can enjoy this thing for little to no money. It's not a big deal, and your life will be better every single day forever because of it. That is the thing that we do. And so, in the beers that we make, the thing that I'm trying to do is to make beers that are worthy of your time at the table. And I'll be blunt about this because it's a thing that Americans, I think, often don't understand. Basically, the best times in your life, the ones that you'll remember on your deathbed, happen in one of two places. They are either in bed or at the table. That is 85% of the most important moments in your life. I think it was a great songwriter, Billy Bragg, that said that about, most important decisions in life are made in one of those two places. Americans, watch huge amounts of television, but they don't cook. In your heart that the table is the center of your life, and yet people will not make time for the table, which means that people will not make time for the thing that makes them the most happy. This is foolishness. And so what we are looking to do is if you're gonna bring us to your table, then we're gonna do our best to be worthy of your time, because we believe that time is some of the most important time in your life. And you invite us into your house and you put us there with your friends and family, that has to be meaningful, and I'm not going to not have it be meaningful. And that is the thing that really drives our quality. If you spend even $12, for a 6-pack of Brooklyn Lager, say you get one of our regular beers, well, I see people out there who have kind of an arrogance. It's like, well, our beer has this problem or that problem, or it's a gusher or whatever. So what? We're new. Somebody might have gone to work for a whole hour, maybe more, to get that $12 that they spent on your beer. You need to respect people's time, which they spent to make the money to buy what you've done. You have no rights whatsoever to make your beer. None. To have anybody buy anything from you. You have to earn that. And it is the process of earning it and being worthy that is the thing that drives me. I'm part of the generation before Todd's, maybe 2 generations before Todd's, where among the people out of my class, if you like, my time, early on, we all had other careers. And that was one of the things that made craft beer what it was, is that, you know, we fell in love and then we threw everything away. You know, everybody my age in craft beer threw away everything to do this. Everything. Our degrees, our dreams of being able to own a house or to have this or to have that. We all had the same American idea. You're going to go to school and you get the degree, you get the degree, you get the job, you get the job, you get the money, you get the money, you get the house, you get the wife, you get the kids, you got the thing, and everybody's got money and we all have shoes. And, you know, you go and you become a brewer and then you become poor, which was not part of your plan. You know, brewing makes you poor. You might not have been poor before. Like when I went into brewing, on my first day, my income dropped by 75%.
Wow.
I had been working in a law firm. I had a window office on the 52nd floor, you know, with, you know, there was air conditioning. You know, I wore a suit and a tie and I liked it. It was nice. People were nice, you know, and things were easy. 2 weeks later, I burned 3 or 4 square inches of skin off my right arm. You know, and I said, well, what am I doing here? Like, what is this? But when you come to meet the customer and someone tells you that you've given them this thing, well, what else do you want? What else do you want? You know, this is the best thing in the world that we do. And that is a motivating factor. It's the motivating factor, at least for me.
Right. So another thing that we've touched on in this conversation is we've talked a lot about geography in a sense. I mean, you got Rhett, who's here, Nashville, Todd's Greensboro. I think Jess has a place in Nashville and one in Raleigh. Garrett, you're in New York. How much does geography play a role into this whole thing? I mean, how much do the barriers of entry impact your business based on where you're located? Does that make sense? Like North Carolina has different regulations than other states and so forth and so on. Is it easier in some places than it is in others, I guess?
Can I start this one?
Go right ahead. That's for anyone.
So I couldn't do what I do any other place because the whole thing is inherently a Western North Carolina or Southern Appalachian thing. It can't be anywhere else. If I wasn't living specifically in Asheville, I think it would have been really hard to stay afloat because that community, and I had been part of the local food scene there for so long that what we make was immediately sort of adopted by the sort of like restaurants and bars that you kind of need to be in for something like this to survive. And then you have a community of people that are more open to the weird stuff that we make than like say Greensboro is where I grew up. And so it would not have worked or been accepted in Greensboro as easily as Asheville. But North Carolina specifically is the regulatory space that I live in. And I think for some distilleries, being in a control state is really helpful because you do get from the state a little bit of a boost. You know, they are mandated supposedly to try and sell North Carolina products. What that means in reality can be really varied, but they're supposed to at least allow you to exist in the warehouse. But being like a stranger product, all of those stores are managed by people who are not necessarily passionate spirits people. You know, it's a sort of system run by sort of like my dad had this job before me and his dad had it before him sort of a thing, and they're kind of cush jobs, and they aren't necessarily inspired or motivated to make their stores sell what's really happening in the marketplace. And honestly, new products for most of these people are just a pain in the ass. And so if I was in a state where I could go to liquor store owners and present my product and try and convince them to put it on the shelf, for me, it would be much easier than it is in North Carolina. But if we had something that was like another craft vodka or whatever, maybe not. You know, maybe North Carolina's the place to be for that sort of a thing, because you get your special North Carolina shelf or whatever, and you know, maybe you'll make it in there. But for us, that was an unforeseen hurdle that is continuously problematic. And like most recently, they passed a law. It'll be a year in October since they passed this, and it allowed us to self-distribute to bars and restaurants. But the ABC board in Raleigh got to hash out the rules and regulations on how that gets actually, you know, the nuts and bolts of that. So the state legislature says I can distribute to bars and restaurants. By the time the ABC got done with it, the only way this works is if I send a personal email to Agnes, who's the head of the ABC, and she approves the one-time special sale, where then I can drive to that local ABC board, process it with some paperwork, and have that bar then come and pick it up. And through that process, it's never gone to the warehouse, but I pay, or the ABC board takes their bailment and warehouse charges and their whole 50% markup on the whole thing. So that's made that law unusable. I think I'm the only distillery who's actually used it. And then when you try and enact or like speak up, you can't get anybody to speak up, because the people you're speaking up against are the ones that hold all the keys to whether you get to sell anything. And so we get silenced into this sort of like, well, you know, let's just try and be nice sort of a situation. So that's my response to North Carolina and what I experienced with that.
Todd, North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah. You know, I mean, for beer, it's been a little different. You know, Garrett alluded to, you know, Pop the Cap, which I didn't realize that you were part of. That's really awesome. You know, so that was a game changer. You know, but still, our I believe it's 15%. You know, that's our cap for alcohol now. You know, in terms of, you know, regulation. You know, we were lucky enough to be able to, you know, we choose to do so, and we have the choice, which is awesome, but we self-distribute, you know, our product in North Carolina. So meaning we don't have to sign with a distributor to do so, you know, a different entity. You know, so there are those things. And then, you know, the other side of it of like, a really interesting thing for us when we were building out our farm location, Burke County is the county that we're located in. Morganton is located in Burke County. You know, passed the city ordinances, you know, years ago to allow the sales of retail sales of alcohol. And in the county, the county was dry. You know, so we were building a brewery out in the county, knowing that we would not be able to conduct retail sales to the public. So we were writing our business plan based off of, you know, much like, you know, Garrett was saying, you know, earlier, without any of those, you know, retail dollars, people coming up and actually drinking, you know, on our property. You know, so that really was informing how we were trying to approach our business model, our expansion. You know, however, we did, you know, sort of know from having, you know, just a lot of connections, you know, locally, talk about other, you know, barriers of entry for us, having my business partners being, really tied in with, the local community from growing up there, having a lot of connections there, were kind of catching wind of that the times were changing, and that there was, that it wouldn't be that far out from a vote happening to make, the county wet. And until that happened, which it did, I've been talking about, folks have been, coming out to our farm to drink, luckily, the only way to do so is if you were like a sports bar, and it doesn't mean what it sounds like of just like putting up a big screen television. It was like, we had to have really odd specific things like you could be an equestrian center, a golf course, basketball courts, tennis courts. And if you had any number of those things, then you could sell alcohol. So we were just like trying to get creative with it. We were like, what if we put a bocce court, or what if we do like Frisbee golf? And, they were just like, no, like none of that stuff counts.
Cornhole.
So,
Everybody's doing cornhole.
yeah. So, I mean, luckily we didn't pull the trigger and like, actually put a tennis court on our farm, just so we could, sell alcohol to the public, because luckily the law did change. But then, even kind of another angle of this for us was that, we opened up our initial brewery in a very small town, not having, like the appeal of like Beer City, USA, of Asheville, North Carolina at the time, so like we were a little worried about like, are we too far off the beaten path? Especially the beers that we were focusing on, using weird, stuff, and I'm like beets and carrots and, all sorts of strange things. It was really hard for that community, at the time. Luckily, they learned to embrace us, and, now we, make such a large spectrum of beers, to the lightest crushable lager, like Garrett said earlier, like, you're gonna find yourself adapting to, what the customer and the consumer, whatever generation is like, coming up and coming of drinking age. It's gonna be something different, is what we've seen in a really short amount of time. And so we didn't know how it was gonna work in Morganton, and then our, second location in a town of 2,000 people, where there's horses and cows across the street from us, so it was like, are we making the right decision? Like, we should be opening up a location where human beings exist. And, so it's been a weird roller coaster, for us, kind of choosing these locations, but it wasn't just, going into it blind. Like, we had a lot of reasons for doing so, especially the Nebo location, out at the farm, a place where we're seeing a lot of outdoor tourism, specifically to enjoy, the surrounding nature, and then ultimately kind of flocking to us.
So Garrett,
I think New York, of course, is going to be a very different story. Yeah, I remember when, North Carolina's cap was 6%. And, I was asked to write letters and to send signed copies of the brewmaster's table to all of your state senators, which I did. And the gist, I can find it sometime, the gist of my letter was that, have a look at this book and understand that everybody else in the country is drinking all this good stuff, and that your attitude, putting in a 6% cap, is an insult to the people of North Carolina, telling them that apparently everybody else can drink 7 and 8% and 10% beers, the beautiful things that people have drunk for hundreds of years and have no problems whatsoever, but somehow your constituents, you believe, are somehow incapable of handling themselves. And they don't appreciate it because that's an insult. And so I have no idea whether or not these letters had any effect whatsoever. But it was interesting to see a completely different point of view, because we'd never had a cap, of any kind in my time. And we also don't have the advantage, as I was saying earlier, of the hometown thing. New Yorkers are very much against that. If you see somebody wearing a New York shirt, the thing that you can be certain of is that they are not from New York. Like, like around here, you don't do that. You know, it's like when you talk to people who are in bands, it's like nobody who's in a band ever wears their band's t-shirt, ever. That's like that. If you're ever caught wearing your own band's t-shirt, it's not like it is with breweries where we can wear our own t-shirts. You're in a band, you absolutely cannot do that. The thing that you do is you wear somebody's t-shirt that represents like one of your great influences or something like that. And this is the way, you know, New Yorkers have tend to feel about everything. And so only recently with the kind of local bar movement and tap room movement, has there been any interest in the idea that something was from nearby. But the World Citizen thing has done a lot for us as well. Brooklyn as a place is famous worldwide. And it's been part of our ethos to create things that are, because we invented collaborations. We were the first brewery in the world to do it. So when I went to Schneider 15 years ago and made a blend of a double IPA and Weiss beer, you know, which I called, and there were two versions. There was one brewed in New York City, and there was one version brewed in Kielheim, Germany. And I did the one recipe, but then I chose all the hops that went into the German one. And then Hans-Peter Drexler, their brewmaster, came over and chose all the hops that went into our version. So one was Brooklyner Schneider Hopfenweisse, and the other one was Schneider Brooklyner Hopfenweisse. And they were two different beers expressing, you know, this cross-cultural thing. And Hans-Peter and I and our families and stuff became friends. And I will tell you a short true story. The first time that either one of us tasted the beer that we had made together was on vacation in Italy. Weeks later, after re-fermentation in the back of his car, while he was on vacation, we popped them overlooking the Mediterranean with our families on the coast of Italy. You know, which is the way collaborations in my dreams would always happen, and not via Instagram. But yeah, I've gone to Brazil. I can have ideas about other places, as I did with Brazil. I love cachaça. So I wanted to do something that really channeled, you know, true cachaça funk, sugarcane flavor. But it's a beer I can't make in New York, because what I wanted to do was take raw sugarcane and crush it directly into the kettle. You know, and the juice that runs is called garapa. And I wanted straight garapa. I mean, most people in the United States would know this, but when you cut sugarcane, within hours, the sugar content starts to drop and it binds up into starch. And so sugarcane, it only retains its true flavor within hours of cutting it. It's like cutting sweet corn or something like that. You start losing stuff immediately. So we went out in the fields, you know, with machetes, and we cut down 700 kilos of sugar cane. We bought a cane crusher and we crushed it straight into the kettle, you know, in this brewery in Belo Horizonte. And we made a beer called Saison de Caipira. Caipira being like kind of farmer / country bumpkin / redneck, depending on your point of view. And caipira is a very particular word in Brazilian Portuguese, because like the word redneck in the United States, it can either be pejorative or it can be taken as a point of pride, depending on who is speaking it and where they're coming from and what attitude you're taking when you say it. So the caipirinha, which is the drink made from cachaça, is the drink of the caipira. So the Saison de Caipira, the whole thing, the concept, the name, everything I made up with after having been to Brazil like 8 times and finding something there that I wanted to channel. These days, I'm also doing stuff, I mean, in the last several years, a lot of things where we're taking local yeast sets that come from natural wine production in nearby wineries. And we're taking the lees, the sediment that drops out of their fermentation, and using it to drive secondary barrel fermentation, sometimes for years. So we've been doing this for 10, 12 years. And most recently, we've done another version of that, where Vinny Celerzo out at Russian River in California shipped us an entire cool ship worth of beer, 30 barrels, which we blended up with about 6 or 7 times as much wort, and then put directly into barrels for a barrel fermentation that is 100% biology from Sonoma County. You know, and the working name of the project is the Sonoma Louvers, because the idea is that the wind blows in the louvers in Sonoma County, but it exits in Brooklyn. And so this is a long range collaboration where the beer was mostly brewed here, but all of the ferment comes from California. So, I mean, because of the way that we travel, we have a very different idea of what collaboration means, of what terroir means, et cetera. I mean, we've done local foraging things, but we've done this all over the world. And so I'm always looking forward to discover something like in the mountains in Japan or somewhere else, not just locally. It includes locally, but not just there.
Thanks for that, Garrett. We are coming short on time. Of course, I can go on with this conversation forever, but there's one question I threw in at the last minute yesterday I really want us to touch on, because I think it's really important. And we get so hung up when we talk about this topic in some of the fundamental business things, if you will, but no one ever talks about personal relationships and how those can also be somewhat of a barrier to entry if you don't have the support systems around you that can nurture this whole thing. So talk to us a little bit about the importance of healthy support systems and balancing those, and who are some of you all's biggest cheerleaders?
Well, this is one reason why, you know, the Michael Jackson Foundation, one reason why when we give out the scholarships, they're not just a scholarship, they also come with a mentor, and that mentor is assigned to you. That mentor is also a person of color working within, you know, the two industries. And, you know, is there not just to give you specific advice about something, but so that you know somebody who has some connections and has been in there for a while, because in many cases in the communities of people of color, like nobody knows any brewers.
Right.
Like nobody knows any brewers, nobody knows any distillers. You know, there's nobody for you to talk to or to reach out to at all. There's nobody you can send an email to except a cold call. You have nothing.
Right.
And you look at how many jobs come from, hey, how about my friend who's working over here? Or you meet somebody at a party or whatever. It's, you know, through social groups, you know, that people often end up, you know, with jobs or at least a connection that they can reach out to somebody. And, you know, these days I can reach just about anybody, but most people coming into the industry, they've got no toehold at all. And we know from other studies of higher education that people, especially if they're coming out of, you know, like say an inner city community and get sent somewhere and they have great grades and they're really, really smart, but they end up, you know, in a community where nobody looks like them, you know, they are going to sink, not because of intellectual reasons, but for emotional reasons. And I think that a lot of people who are, you know, currently in the community have never once thought about what it would be like if every time you went into a place to get a beer like the ones that you make, or an Amaro like the ones that you make, or whatever else, every single time you went in, everybody in there was Black. And there was you never saw anybody else. Now you would like to say, oh, I'd be fine, but really, you know, because humans, you know, that can be a little bit rough.
Yeah.
And just think about it the other way around. That's what we have to do. And so in order to change that playing field, we're going to give you somebody. And if you don't like that person, great, fine. We'll find another person. But somebody who's assigned to you saying, you're going to usher this person, you know, into this business. And then later on, I'm going to put a hand on you 2 or 3 years in and say, okay, now it's your turn. I want you to mentor somebody else who's coming up behind now that you've got 3 years in. Because frankly, someone might come to me and say, Garrett, how do I get into brewing? And I'm like, how the hell do I know? I've been here for 30 years. Like, am I really going to be the best person to tell you how to get into brewing today? No. Talk to somebody who just did it, like, 2 years ago, and what they went through and how they scrapped. But I can tell you, I remember the days pre-internet, when people would come to interview Garrett Oliver, and they would walk straight past me, wouldn't even look at me, walk straight up to my assistant, Kurt, who was from Stone Mountain, Georgia, and had wavy blonde hair and, looked the part as far as they were concerned. And they would say, hello, Garrett, and shake his hand. Now, that doesn't happen anymore to me, but it does happen to lots of other people. And so, mentorship is important. Representation is important. Knowing people, is important. And already before we've even gotten to our scholarship programs, I am connecting people saying, hey, a person, of whatever descent. And, I've been trying to start a distillery, and I'm a medical doctor. One guy was a medical doctor, and he's like, I want to really get into distilling. I don't know how to start. Who do I talk to? And I put him together with another guy, who said that he wanted to help, and he's a master distiller somewhere. And I'm like, great. Put you guys together by email. You guys are off and running and have a conversation. So there's gonna be a whole wing of what the foundation does. That's gonna be kind of a community center that, even though we're just going to be funding technical education, we're also, a resource, for connectivity, because that's something that our communities have created for us, but we don't often, it's not that we don't want to let anybody else in. We don't even tell them that our community exists. And so there's a lot of work to be done.
It's interesting you bring up the point about someone walking right past you and going to your assistant. This is funny. I have to tell everyone this. It's just kind of funny. I had a new neighbor move in right across the street from me a few years ago. And I was out front. I was pressure washing my house. I was probably 10 feet.
Uh-oh, you're already,
I was probably 10 feet from my front door, okay? I was pressure washing my house. And he walks down the sidewalk, and I'm literally, I wish I had a diagram of my house so you could see it. I'm pressure washing my house, and he rings the doorbell.
Yes.
And I stopped the pressure washer, and I'm like, can I help you? He said, I'm looking for the owner.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
yes.
Case in point,
Here,
right?
Look, and I'll tell you something. Here's the thing that as a man, we don't understand. Okay, a woman comes up to the table, and she gives you the menus, and the guy's like looking at the wine list, and she says, "Can I help you with the wine?" What does the guy say? Sure, that would be great. Can you get me the sommelier? And looks at some guy over here, and it's never occurred to him that she is a sommelier, which is why she asked you, would you like some help with the wine list? Right? So erasures happen constantly on all levels, unconsciously. That last thing, I am sure that I've done that. I'm sure that I've done that. Like, I have to think hard not to do that, myself. This is the background radiation of where we live. And this is part of, but we're going to talk about barriers to entry. This is a barrier to entry.
Absolutely.
It's a barrier to entry. You talk to women in craft beer and how they are disregarded. Guys come to the bar and there's, the woman bartender in front of them, and they're interested in the beer list, and they just start looking up and down the bar, trying anything they can do to get away from them. Same thing with bartenders. I want the guy to make my drink.
Yeah.
You won't say that usually, but they act like that. And so there are a lot of barriers to entry, and they're all over the place. And I think that, it's incumbent upon all of us to try to circumvent those things, not only in other people, but also in ourselves, because we've all done this stuff. We've all done it, everybody's guilty.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, Todd. So support systems, and who are your biggest cheerleaders?
Well, I mean, community for sure. We have relied heavily on our local community, since day one, and we've had a lot of cheerleaders, locally throughout the years. For me these days, that was really important to me early on, because I felt like it was measuring, how I was doing with, with wanting to, badly have that place and these creations, that people were going to support. So when that was happening, that was instrumental in, kind of continuing, knowing that it was, going to work, and really just kind of like, continue tinkering and, doing those things. And so, as we've grown, and it's, as I mentioned, not just, me or, myself and, a few employees, my staff is my biggest, support. My head brewer, to be honest, I would be lost without the dude. So he plays a huge role in what we're creating and accomplishing, at Fauna Flora. So yeah, community early on, still, hugely important. And yeah, now for me, understanding that where we are today, truly wouldn't be possible without a lot of different minds and a lot of different really hardworking people, really helping to get everything done.
All right. Rhett, last but not least.
All right. I'm going to sort of take a different tack on this, and maybe this is more of a pre-COVID answer, but I think inherent in the craft beverage world is sort of there's supposed to be a built-in support network, because we're producing products that are supposed to be shared, and they're supposed to be like enjoyed with your neighbors. And bars are shaped to have people sit next to each other, and you talk to strangers and you get to meet people, and that's like kind of a lot of the point of like making these things, is sort of like friendship and conversation and fun times. And so I think that that's just like one of the best parts of this industry, is getting to sort of be a part of that. And when we go into places that have our product, I think it's really encouraging to have a bartender that I've never met in Atlanta or something get really excited about what we're doing. And I think that we all probably question ourselves to some degree. You think that what you're making is great, but then you certainly have times when you're sort of like, well, is it though? And yeah, I think it helps, especially like most of my friends don't necessarily love the products that I make. But they can still be supportive as well. And, they can sit there and have whatever cocktail they want while I, dive into the weird stuff. And, that's whatever it is. And I also have some great employees, and my main employee and assistant, she was with me for 7 years as one of my main farm workers, and she knows nothing, or she at the time had no knowledge of distillation, but she's a great worker and a great employee. And I knew that I could teach her this stuff. And she's going to be running that distillery, and you know, as soon as she, could take the reins for me. And finding people like that has been this, saving grace for the farm and for Ed Orion. So
And that's something else we hadn't discussed, but maybe it'll be in another program, but identifying early on who those key people are, so that you can actually have some structure and you can eventually work on being the strategist for the business as opposed to working so much in the business. But any questions? We have some good questions coming in the chat box, but I want to, before we go into final thoughts, I just wanted to give everybody a chance to put the questions in the chat box if you have any additional questions. There will be a recording available. We were about 5 minutes in until I hit the button, but I will share the recording for those who would like to review it.
I don't know whether this pertains to Todd or Rhett, in their business style, but one piece of advice that I think I can give that has been very useful to me over the years. People sometimes, in larger businesses, there is a tradition of the exit interview, which is where someone's leaving your company. And you ask them like, well, so how was your time here? When I was intricately involved, like personally hiring every brewer, I did things somewhat differently. When people would come in and, we're working at a pretty high level. So we had a lot of people, in our department, and we'd hire them in and they come in, maybe they spend 3-4 years at some other brewery. And I would tell them, it's like, okay, from day one, you have an assignment. 3 weeks in, I'm going to ask you to write a report about everything that you see wrong here at Brooklyn Brewery, everything that you think is wrong about what we do every day, how we do it, when we do it, and what it looks like. And after you write that report up, we're going to sit down and talk about it. And after that report, I will then send it back to you with a set of resolutions as to, this is why we're not going to do that. That's a good idea, and this is how we're going to institute it. And when you put this stuff in there, I want you to color code it as to whether you think this needs to happen right now, it should happen within 6 months, or it should happen within a year. And this is a way of, I call it extracting DNA. If you teach people over and over again, you bring people in, you suffuse them with your DNA, which is you teach them how to do things your way, period. But you don't take in any of their DNA. You get the result that happens in nature, which is idiot children. Replicate your DNA over and over again, and you will end up with a mess. What you want to make you stronger is somebody just works somewhere else. Even if you have been in brewing 5 times as long as they have, they know something that you don't know. And it's part of your job, if you're smart, to find out what that is. And if it's good, then to use it. That's the way biology works, and that's the way that good businesses work. And so it also produces a situation where everyone gets heard. Everyone gets heard. Like everybody gets heard, and it's like, well, you'll never have to go through sitting there saying, I wish I could say something about whatever. It's like, well, you were given a great opportunity, not that it goes away after your 3rd week, but you establish that this is a place where you can talk about things. You establish that I heard you, and if you get told no, which would frequently happen, you at least know why. It's not like a mystery as to what happened. There's a decision-making process, which is real, and you might not like it, you may not agree with it, but like it happened in a certain way. And it's not like a closed black box. And I think a lot of people don't often think that way. They're like, my way or the highway, and that's just stupid. Like you're never gonna learn anything from anybody else. And it's also just ego. It's like you think you're amazing and brilliant, and maybe you were good, but you're not better than everybody, who comes in front of you. or you're not hiring correctly. You know, I look to hire people who are better than me at least something, you know, and if I'm sitting there, I'm saying this guy is smarter than me, that's not a threat, that's an opportunity. And those are the people that we're looking for. You know, I'm like, great, you know, awesome. Tell us how you did that.
I found that typically a lot of times your most talented people can be your laziest because they think they know it already. And typically the ones who, when you're trying to identify those key people, it's interesting because they're the ones that you least expect, because they're typically the ones who are, they're relatively smart, they're willing to learn, they ask questions, and they'll put in the work. So that's the type of person that I would want on my team. But those are some very good points, Garrett. Appreciate it.
Well, the other thing that we do for that is that in turn, each one of them got to make their own beer with their own name, their own release party, and like their own like little advertising things, and you'd have a party around it. And guess what? Those guys who were lazy, you know, before, they sure smarten up really quick and start paying very close attention when it's like, nah, man, it's all you. It's all you. If it turns out great, it's all you. If it turns out terrible, it's all you.
It's all you.
How do you feel about that? You know, and they're like, people start freaking out. Suddenly, people who are quiet are not so quiet anymore, and they get super engaged because they understand that this is pressure.
Yeah.
It's you know, and it's in public, and you're gonna fall down on your face. You will fall down on your face in public. You know, understand what this really is. You know, it's like you get all the power, and power is nice. Guess what it comes with? You know?
Yeah.
So
Responsibility. Yeah.
responsibility, exactly. So you know, that's also, if you can pull it, it is a good lever.
Yeah.
You know, because it not only teaches you about people, it teaches people about themselves, and also, you know, empowers people in a great way.
That's great. Well, I don't see any questions coming in the chat box, but of course I want to thank each of you for joining us today, but I want to also give you each an opportunity to kind of promote what it is you're doing now. If you got anything going on now, any special promotions, if you've written a book, Garrett, if you got, you know, so anything you all have coming up that you want to let us in on, that'd be great.
Well, the Michael James Jackson Foundation, www.themjf.org, THEMJF.org. As I was saying earlier, we provide scholarships and mentorship for technical education for people of color within the brewing and distilling industries. And we have, in the last several weeks, we've raised about $100,000. And so we will be sending people out into the world for their technical education, everything from UC Davis to, you know, to ABG to Master Brewers Association courses, et cetera, and shepherding them through that process so they can come back out the other end as more qualified, you know, brewers and distillers to do better within our industry. So if you want to get involved, you know, send me an email. You go to our website, you'll find out how to donate, and also, you know, how to reach us, and you know, and it could be that we end up connecting you with somebody else. So hopefully we are, you know, a hub for you know, for some good things. But we'll appreciate whoever shows up and wants to help.
Great. Todd, Rhett?
Yeah, I mean, we just we have a lot of tasty suds coming down the pipeline right now. If if y'all are local, come and check out the Whippoorwill Farm location. Yeah, I mean, just a lot of fun ingredients this time of year. We're going to be foraging for kudzu flowers for an annual beer that we use those in. So yeah, I mean, we're just kind of plugging along as usual. Thankful to be keeping awesome staff healthy and employed, and making awesome beers that inspire all of us right now. So yeah, please check us out if you haven't.
Thanks, Todd. Rhett, final thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think, just anyone who's local, once we get back open again, please come check us out. For folks who are not real familiar with the Amaro world, it's a really great sort of dive into that if you come visit the tasting room, because we've got very talented bartenders that are doing some cool stuff in there. We've got some new products that should be coming out soon, and we'll have a new outdoor bar when we get back open. That'll be nice. And we've got these holiday 3-packs that should be hitting the ABC store shelves and the Georgia market in a few weeks, I'd say. And those are our Fernet and our Amaro Flora, which is elderflower Amaro, and Lindera, which is the spice bush infused vodka, in a cute little handmade cedar kind of toolbox thing with a rope handle. And there's kind of a limited quantity thing, and I think they make a nice gift. And also they're $3.75 bottles, so if you're not sure that you're into what we're doing, this is a good sort of sampler of what we do. And so, yeah, and I just appreciate being a part of this. I think it's been good and helpful. I've learned a lot. So,
Well, great.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. You've been awesome. You've taken 2 hours of your time to spend with us. And Jess, thank you so much for tying this all together. I'm so glad that Jess and I had a chance to meet up, because I think this is going to be awesome. Jeff, thank you for being here. Jeff is a superstar here in Asheville for sure. So if anyone doesn't know Jeff, you definitely need to get connected with him. And so one last thing, you all, just remember, the next one will be Thursday, September the 24th from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. It's going to be on developing a brand. I did put the link up in the chat box, and I will be reaching out to each of you, Garrett, Rhett, and Todd, because I want to discuss some further things, some other opportunities that we have coming down the pipeline. So thank you all. Any last words, Jessica, Jess, Jeff, you good?
I'm good. Yeah. Thanks again to, Todd, Garrett, and Rhett. That was super informative, and y'all are very insightful. And I appreciate you taking the time, and for everybody who signed up for this first webinar of the series through the end of the year. So look forward to next month.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Jess.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I appreciate everyone listening. Cheers.
Thanks.
Take care.
All right. Ciao.
Bye-bye.